It's that time again. They want your money.
Americans who can afford it should pay their fair share.
But what is fair? These people say we should all pay more.
Denmark is becoming the first country in the world to impose a fat tax.
The media applaud new taxes on things they don't like.
Basically, you go to the supermarket, you buy a food that has above a certain level of fat.
But we could all pay less if politicians didn't give special breaks to certain people.
Honey, there's $8,000 in here.
Finally, you'd be surprised at the size of the sneaky taxes Uncle Sam imposes.
The sin tax adds about a nickel to each pack of cigarettes and about 2 cents to each bottle of beer.
So many taxes. I need a drink. Taxing time. That's our show tonight.
And now, John Stossel.
Our tax system is awful. The tax code, this is part of it, is unreadable. This is a third of it. And this is just the beginning. The regulations that go on to explain these 3 books total 75,000 pages. Now, some taxes are necessary. There is a cost to government, and we need to pay for that somehow. But it's outrageous that we have to spend endless hours figuring out what we owe. And the taxes are so complex, most Americans now pay someone for help. And it's outrageous that this is filled with special breaks for certain politically connected people. And those breaks make our economy less healthy and less fair. We should just throw out the whole tax code and start over with something simpler, something understandable. Steve Forbes has tirelessly pushed that idea for years. And you failed miserably.
We're still trying to persuade, John, and every April 15th we get more support. And I think in the 2016 elections it's going to be out at the forefront. There's a growing consensus. I think it'll be on the table in 2017 in a way that hasn't been for almost 30 years.
What makes you say you're getting more support?
Even Democrats now realize this code is indefensible. Even on the Simpson-Bowles Commission, they bought on the idea if you declutter the code, you can cut tax rates across the board. There's no group in America other than maybe a lobbyist who defend this code.
Not even tax accountants? All right, but simpler I get. But why flat? Flat means that everybody pays after a certain point. Poor people don't pay income tax, but then everybody pays the same. But that's not the most complex part of the code.
Well, if you have more than one tax rate, then you open it up for politicians to clutter the code again. After 1986, where they made a stab at simplification, 2 tax rates, 15% and 28%. 4 years later, there's a third rate. Bill Clinton added 2 more, and we're off to the races. And we have had 14,000 changes since 1986. And so with a single rate, everyone knows if you're doing something. Today, you can make a change in the code. 6 months later, people may discover what actually happened.
Now, you say if we had a flat tax, this would help charitable giving. But I would lose the deduction for charitable giving. So how would that help?
Because Americans, one, don't need to be bribed to give, and history shows that when Americans have more, they give more. Charitable giving in terms of dollars, not in terms of hours volunteered, roughly 2% of GDP been that way even before we had the income tax. In the 1980s, when the top rate got cut from 70% down to 28%, charitable institutions, especially colleges, went berserk. But what happened was not only did charitable giving go up, but the rate of growth went up. When people have more in this country, they give more.
So even though people say, oh, I get a deduction for this, I'm going to give to charity and I take my deduction, they give anyway without it.
Sure they do. It's been that way. Go back to the 19th century. We've always been doing this.
You say it would encourage home ownership. Not that I'm certain that's good, but the real estate lobby is wedded to these mortgage deductions because they say that encourages home ownership. You get rid of that, it'll hurt home ownership.
Well, if you have real lobbyists in Washington, they have to have a rationale. But the fact of the matter is, again, when people have more, they will buy a house. They don't need to be bribed by the government to do it. And we've had growing home ownership in this country for a long time. When you try to stimulate home ownership artificially, you get the kind of disaster we had several years ago.
In your ideal world, with the flat tax, it would be on a postcard. You could just fill out one postcard?
One sheet of paper, postcard, or a few keystrokes if you're onto your PC.
And a couple countries, a couple countries have this. Estonia has a flat tax of 21%. So the form is 1 page long, takes 5 minutes to complete. But Estonia is a new country.
Over 30 countries around the world. Vladimir Putin, who peaked early, put this in a 13% rate back in 2000 when Russia had a tax code that made ours look simple. And within a couple of years, revenues doubled. Hong Kong's had a variation for 60 years. One of the most prosperous pieces of real estate on earth, even though it was dirt poor 60 years ago, now booming.
You're fighting history pushing this. The first 1040...
Americans' existence was fighting history. We are the only invented nation on earth, so it's part of our tradition to fight what everyone else does.
But I look at how this stuff, I threw one, there are more to come, how it's grown. When the first 1044 pages, including the instructions, today it's 176 pages. The tax rate, 1% in today's dollars if you made $500,000, 6% if you made $11 million. We've come a long way.
It went berserk almost from the beginning because of the First World War. And even after 2 world wars, politicians have discovered an income tax is a money machine. They're not going to give it up easily. And so let's go and have a simplified code. That would be a huge step in the right direction. Half the lobbying in Washington revolves around this beast. And let's kill it and start all over again. And to show how stupid it is, John, Dave Camp, who's now leaving the House of Representatives, heads up the tax writing committee. He tried to simplify the code using the existing code, using those books you have there, 1,000 pages. That shows how bad this thing is. It took 1,000 pages to try to simplify it.
And it wasn't well received, and he's leaving Congress, I guess, in frustration. Thank you, Steve Forbes. I'm too scared to do my taxes. I'm sure I'll get something wrong, and my enemies in government will prosecute me. So I hired Bob. He's my accountant. I don't want to have an accountant. I don't want to spend time talking to Bob, but I have to. And I have to pay him. What, several $1,000s a year?
That's nobody's business.
It's probably true. But what a waste. Think of what I could do with the money. I could have this delicious steak dinner 200 times a year. I could buy this cool motorcycle.
I could take this cruise ship all the way from New York to Venice and back. Or better yet, I could do some good for the world. The same money I waste on Bob, I could buy 2 Habitat for Humanity homes overseas. Or I could pay 3 kids' tuition at this Catholic school.
I could go on torturing myself about the good things I could do with that money, but instead, let's move on to the size of the tax bite. Former New York Times reporter David K. Johnston just wrote a book called Divided, The Perils of Our Growing Income Inequality. He wants to address that with higher taxes on rich people. Will McBride of the Tax Foundation does not want to do that. So, David, you want higher taxes?
I don't want higher tax rates. Here's what I want. The thing you talked about just now with Steve Forbes, it's not the rates that make the system complex. You can do that on a postcard. It's all those rules that are unreadable that allow people to make money they don't pay taxes on. So the very wealthiest people in this country literally can live tax-free, and I've shown this in my books and elsewhere from the law.
Not many do.
Yes, many of them do.
Live tax-free?
Yes,
How?
Absolutely. Well, let's do Warren Buffett. Okay? His wealth is $64 billion. The year he released his tax return, he said he made $64 million. You think his return was 1,000th of his wealth? Then he's the worst investor in America.
Well, he's not tax-free. He pays something. He gets dividends that have already been taxed.
But wait a second. What you're missing is that Warren Buffett's income is seen in the tax system is a tiny, tiny portion of his actual wealth increase. And that's how we need to fix the system. And the reason the tax code is so thick is all of these rules that allow people to not have to recognize income for tax purposes. And if
but
we
it's all
fix
for
that,
good
we
reason,
can do the rest of
to
it.
encourage certain good social
the market
behavior.
Will take care of that. Let's have the market take care of that.
Will?
Well, I think what we're all describing here is a tax system that's broken. There's always been loopholes. There's always been people that slip through the system. There's been lots of evasion, and it's the biggest problem is that it's really suppressed investment, saving. Steve Forbes was just explaining a flat tax, which is basically getting away from this idea of taxing income. I think it's a very sound
Well, it
argument.
still taxes income.
No,
it'd just be one rate for everybody.
Well, what is different is that it doesn't tax investment doubly, triply, quadruply as our income tax does. So that's the problem. We're really suppressing investment in this country through these multiple layers of tax. You described one, the corporate tax, then the dividend tax, capital gains tax, taxing the same dollar twice, three times.
All right, but it sounds like we're all in agreement we need simplicity. But how can this be? You've got David way over on the left. He worked for the New York Times. He's probably practically a socialist. And you're on the right.
Also a business founder.
The Tax Foundation. You represent those rich people. Where's the difference? Let's start with you, Will.
We both are very concerned about workers. We're concerned about the poor. We're concerned about general welfare. And the thing is that the best thing for the poor is to stop this excessive tax burden on investment.
So you don't have a difference here?
I think we may disagree on that last point.
One thing we would disagree about perhaps is I think the current tax system basically protects existing wealth and holds back strivers. If we want to have a system that will make us more prosperous in the future, it's the strivers, the people who create new fortunes. If you go down the road we're going, things like dynastic wealth and no estate tax, you end up with 18th century France, and we know how that ended.
Well, you're saying Donald Trump or Charles Koch, I think they're strivers.
What about their grandchildren? Should they be able to inherit everything?
Inheritance tax is not a big factor in the tax revenues.
All the tax planning that is done to help people avoid the estate tax involves enormous things with the income tax. In fact, the gift tax is to back up the income tax. And part of the problem here is that the political power that you're seeing that's distorting the system is really focused on protecting existing wealth, not promoting the creation of new wealth. If we had integrity in the system and simplicity and we focused on the strivers, we would be much better off in the long run.
You buy that, the strivers?
I absolutely buy that. I mean, we have multiple layers of tax on the strivers. Right from their first dollar of income, there's a payroll tax. Then we have the income taxes kicking in at different levels, and then all sorts of loopholes built into that. We need to have something that's comprehensible, that is something like a flat tax.
What, this isn't comprehensible?
Not to me, and I'm an expert.
This is also so reasonable. Why can't it just happen? Why didn't it happen last time when they had tax reform?
Incentives for politicians. What are their incentives to do this? What's the incentive if you're a senator and you have to raise tens of thousands of dollars a week to get reelected to address the problems in a way that we're all reasonably talking about with whatever minor differences we have?
If you have a special break, then people have to come to you and kiss your ring and beg you for a special break. And you're powerful. Thank you, Will and David. To keep this conversation going, our Twitter hashtag is Tax Time. Let people know what you think. Coming up, to lower their tax bills, thousands of Americans move to different states. We'll tell you which ones. But next, how government uses this book to manipulate us.
The federal government provides tax credits, subsidies, in order to help the individuals and families purchase qualified health insurance plans.
I get tax deductions because I give a lot to charity and I have a retirement account which lets me defer some taxes. The less I have to pay to politicians, the better. Of course, taking deductions makes my taxes more complex. And so I waste money on an accountant and I have to do more record keeping. Yaron Brook of the Ayn Rand Institute says we should focus on another reason why those tax deductions are not a good thing. They are a way government manipulates people. What do you mean?
Well, government's role is to protect our values. What the tax code is doing is trying to choose our values for us. It's telling us charity is good. Maybe it is.
Protect our values? I thought government's role is to protect our persons and property, keep us safe.
Not trying to steer us in the direction of particular goals, particular ideas. So, they decide I need a solar panel, so they're going to give me a tax credit for solar. They want me to buy a house, so they're going to give me a tax deduction on a mortgage. But if I pay cash, I don't get any benefit because somehow they want me to take on debt.
Well, most people don't pay cash for a house, and they've decided, hey, if people own their houses, they'll take care of them, they'll build communities. That's better for America.
Maybe that's true. None of the government's business. The point is, it's not the government's business to dictate my behavior. As long as they're not hurting other people.
They're encouraging.
Encouraging, but it's encouraging by use of coercion, right? If I don't do what they tell me, buy a house, they steal more of my money. They take more of my money. So there's a gun behind this encouragement.
And a carrot on the other end. Look at this disgusting commercial from the real estate lobby.
Honey, there's $8,000 in here.
The National Association of Realtors wants you to take advantage of the $8,000 first-time homebuyer tax credit.
It's just so brazen, Uncle Sam winking.
Well, then this is who benefits from this. There's a pressure group behind each one of these deductions that are benefiting directly.
Mortgage Bankers Association, the Association of Home Builders, Association of Realtors.
They benefit because home prices go up, and there are more and more and more of these deductions because there are more and more of these pressure groups that get formed just for the purpose of getting these tax deductions.
All right, take my biggest deductions. A pension. Government decided we want to encourage people to save for the future, then maybe we won't have to take care of them. I get to defer some taxes.
It's the maybe we don't get to take care of them, which I find funny, because they don't ever shrink that. That's never shrunk. But whether I save or not at any given point in my life should be my decision, free of government coercion, free of government involvement. Yeah, absolutely, saving for retirement's a good thing. Everybody should do it. I don't need government to give me an incentive to do that. I want much lower taxes, then I'll have a lot more money to save.
You say you don't need this incentive, but I think a lot of Americans say, what is government for except to steer people to better activities for the good of the whole country?
This is how we lose our freedoms. When government starts steering people in the direction of what they should eat, what they should consume, what they can and cannot buy, what investments they can and cannot make, what's a good retirement, a bad retirement plan. These are exactly the kind of freedoms that we're losing in America every single day as paternalistic government now starts managing our lives and manipulating our behavior.
All right, take charity then. I don't see how I lose freedom. I freely choose which charities I give to, and every buck I give to Central Park Conservancy is 50 cents less than I give to Uncle Sam.
Absolutely. Given the tax code, go crazy with it. But as you know, I'm less charitable than you, and therefore I'm paying more taxes than you. Why? Why is charity? Why is the fact that you're more charitable? Change this. What I'd like to see is both of us.
Charity's good.
Well, who says? Right?
Now, we should explain when he says, as I know he's less charitable, the Ayn Rand Institute. And Ayn Rand said,
I'm not against charity. Ayn Rand's not against charity. It's just how important it is that we might disagree. But the point is, again, government has no role here. You want to give it to charity? Great. I want to invest it rather than give it to charity? Good for me. It's not government's job to decide if I should start a business right now or if I should give the money to charity. There are lots of things that might postpone whether I give to charity or might postpone whether I want to save for retirement. I might be investing right now in a business that's more important. And that doesn't get the same tax treatment.
Wasteful, though, as these specific deductions are, any politician who challenges them hurts himself politically. During the last presidential election, Mitt Romney suggested tax deductions for wind power were excessive, and they are. But then wind power advocates ran this commercial.
Until a few weeks ago, I had a job building wind turbines. I got laid off because Mitt Romney and his friends in Congress want to eliminate tax credits for the wind industry.
He wants to take this guy's job away.
Yeah, but what you don't see, of course, is the jobs that are not created elsewhere because investment is flowing into a ridiculous industry like wind power that really is so economically inefficient that makes absolutely no sense, rather than into industries that make profits, that can grow, that actually create lots more employment than the wind farm ever will. This is the problem, again, with the government trying to micromanage the economy, micromanage our lives. They're lousy at it. They can't do it because they can't replace the value choices that each one of us makes for ourselves. Only we can do that, and we need to be left free to do it.
But given that they'll run ads like that, can you blame politicians for chickening out?
Well, you have to blame politicians. We don't elect them to chicken out. But no, I mean, this is the way the system is built. The system is built to perpetuate this and to expand it. You're going to see more of these kind of, and when Republicans get in, they give it to their favorite groups. And when Democrats get in, they give it to their favorite groups.
Thank you. You're on Brooke. Coming up, taxes on sin. Did you sin this week? And also how the tax code screws the little people. Want to start a small business? In some ways, that's easier than ever today. Interest rates are low, and the Internet now allows us easier access to potential customers. But business professor Brian Brenberg says what makes it harder to start a business is the tax code. It kills little guys. But what do you mean? Because the code applies to big guys and little guys equally.
It does apply to big guys and little guys equally. The problem is big guys have a lot more resources to throw at these 75,000 pages than small guys do. It wouldn't take GE, for example. It wouldn't surprise me if they have 500 to 1,000 people working for them that they can have sifting through this. And
well, we actually checked that.
Okay.
In the year 2011, according to a report, they had about 1,000 employees just doing this instead of producing light bulbs, whatever they do.
Yeah, so I mean, in theory, everybody's looking at this at the same time in the same way, but the truth is GE is finding lots and lots of ways to make this work to their advantage. Small businesses cannot do that.
The National Small Business Association polled businesses and found that they spend more than 80 hours a year on federal taxes. That's 2 work weeks. Add payroll taxes, 2 work weeks. Sales taxes, 1 work week.
You're talking about a month of work devoted not even to paying taxes, just trying to comply with the tax code, right? And the big problem there is if you're spending time working on taxes, you're not spending time improving products, investing in your employees, expanding your business, creating jobs, which is exactly what the economy needs.
But you can't have a tax code that says, okay, we'll give small guys a break and GE, you could afford it.
No, give them the same thing, right? Create a level playing field. The point here is to not put small businesses at a disadvantage, right? You want to create an equality of competition or the opportunity to compete, right? So create a tax code that both of these types of businesses can comply with and work with.
But what are the odds of that when politicians get such rewards for favoring certain people? The last fiscal cliff bill, we're out of money, but somehow TV and film producers, everybody wants to be friends with them. They got a special credit. Owners of NASCAR racetracks, wind turbine makers, that's GE.
No, of course. The odds aren't easy. The odds aren't good. And as you talked with Steve Forbes before, I mean, people have been at this an awful long time. One thing I think we haven't done is framed this debate in terms of some of the words or some of the language that I think is very popular now. When I look at this, I see institutionalized inequality of opportunity, right? If you're big, if you're wealthy, you're connected, this can work in your advantage, right? But if you're the small guy, then you're at a severe disadvantage, right? And if we think about inequality in the United States, why not start attacking it by taking this thing down from 75,000 pages to something that everybody can deal with?
And I should say that the 75,000 is beyond this. That's the explanation of these guys.
Right, exactly.
But the movement is to add more.
Right, yeah. Well,
you read the paper, it's a little adjustment, a tweak here.
Yeah, and what's really so tough about that, why this is really an issue, is actually today it is probably more than ever easier for your average person to be an entrepreneur, to start something, right? Web platforms like Etsy, Amazon, PayPal, right? These things allow you to put up a storefront, reach customers, ship a product, bill them, and collect money in an easier way than ever before, right? So we have the opportunity to encourage entrepreneurship, and we throw a tax code at entrepreneurs that says, don't even try. Don't even try. That's absolutely not what we want to be doing.
And you hear from people who say, hey, I got the internet, great new stuff, but because of this, I'm not going to try?
I had a conversation this afternoon. Not that I'm not going to try, right? But I'm going to get into it. I'm going to realize very quickly, I don't know how to handle this, right? And you do one of two things. You either pay somebody a lot of money to do it for you, right?
Or you buy this complicated software.
Or you try to do it yourself. And the truth is, or you roll the dice. I'm just going to roll the dice and hope nobody's checking this all that closely, and I can just go on with my business, right? Do you want to put people in a position where they're rolling the dice? I don't want to put people in that position. I want them thinking about their business and creating great products and creating jobs for people.
Thank you, Brian Brenberg. Coming up, a cool way to understand how high taxes persuade some people to just pack up and move somewhere else. You're stuck with your federal taxes. Live in America, you have to pay. But America's having 50 different states means you can avoid some taxes if you live in the right state. And that's a good thing because it creates competition. If your state does something stupid, you can leave. Take your talent, money elsewhere. Millions of people do. Travis Brown invented a clever way to document who's moving where. Here it is.
We're looking at the movement of Americans and their income, measured by the Internal Revenue Service taxpayer data files since 1992 to 2010, the largest time available.
Track it by time.
That's right. That's right. We can go right up here.
You can, maybe.
We can do it from this entire period and show from where and to where Americans have been voting with their feet and taking their wallet.
These red states, people have left and gone often to Florida.
That's right.
Or Texas or North Carolina.
America's biggest winning state is the Sunshine State of Florida. A gain of $10,000 a minute of every day on average for the last 18 years. There are 9 states like Florida that do not penalize that work. And they, as a group, tend to do very well in our analysis.
And the analysis shows people leave the income tax states for no income tax states?
The 9 states of different locations and weather and climate, as a group, over the 18-year period, have collected over $166 billion from the other 41 states. The reverse is also true by correlation. The 9 states with the highest income tax rates have lost nearly $150 billion. Nearly $19 billion has been going straight out of New York for Florida. In New England, there is one state that stands out, like New Hampshire. Live free or die is their motto, and they show a gain with a very different weather climate of $3.5 billion.
Yeah, it does show that it's not just about weather. California always seems to be red here.
Well, California, these states in green, are receiving California income from taxpayers that have chosen to leave the Golden Bear State. And, of course, neighbors like Nevada, right next door, are showing a gain of $18 billion, 10 of which is coming straight out of places like Lake Tahoe.
The biggest per capita winners, Florida, Montana, Wyoming, South Carolina, Vermont.
Yes.
Biggest losers, Alaska, New York, Washington, D.C., Illinois, Maryland.
That's right. Yeah, you look at the total tax burden as a percent of your income, and the high tax states are giving their income away, and lower tax states are doing better and better and better.
And people watching now, they can download their own version of this just by going to this website.
That's right.
How Many Walks.
HowManyWalks.com. You can have this information for your city, your county, and your state available in your smartphone, downloading the app, or surfing this web map to it.
It's useful. And I like it that states now advertise their tax advantage. Florida and Texas ran these ads.
0% personal income tax. That's right. 0. The best place to get away from it all is also the best place to get it all done. Grow your company in Florida.
If you're tired of the same old recipe of overtaxation, overregulation, and frivolous litigation, get out before you go broke. Texas is calling.
Texas Governor Rick Perry escalated the tax competition by naming other states, trashing other states.
If you just took the book of rules and regulations in New York State, it's 49,000 pages.
Why have more jobs and businesses moved to Texas than any other state? We have no state income tax.
Well, I love it that he points out the greed of my state's politicians.
It makes perfect sense why Governor Perry is in New York to recruit and get more business.
And my politicians, feeling the pain of losing people and money to states like Texas, have started running this ad.
New New York is open to innovation. That's why New York has a new plan. Dozens of tax-free zones all across the state. Move here, expand here, or start a new business here and pay no taxes for 10 years.
But that's not just lower taxes. It sounds it's a certain tax-free zone.
This is the classic case, I think $140 million of promotion of that kind of ad, but it requires you to be selected by your state government as a winner in a particular zone, and there are a lot of conditions that would apply there.
Apparently, you have to be near the State University of New York and some other private colleges. Retailers are excluded, so are law firms, hotels, medical offices, power plants. It just sounds like arrogant politicians saying, well, I'll take that one. I like this one.
By the time you fill out all that paperwork, you might have had enough time just to move to Palm Beach or Austin.
I still think it's weather. Look, this is New York. They're going to Florida. Just most of the green is down here.
Well, we certainly see evidence that for Texas, Tennessee, and Florida, they do very well. But take a state like Wyoming, where it's still snowing in this environment. We have a gain of $1.42 billion. A state they're now calling the digital prairie. If you want a job with an area in South and North Dakota, they're doing very well in upper tier Great Plains states. And you have other states.
The weather is really lousy there.
Well, not if you're a pheasant.
And this looks this way because you even break it down county by county where people are.
That's right. And for example, we know that Chicago is a big part of the $29 billion loss to a state like Illinois. We can zoom in and look particularly on where that state loss is, even within the state, by going into, let's say, Cook County. And that's what allows us to see the relationship of how much responsibility a city may have for governing their state, correctly or incorrectly.
Thank you, Travis. And again, you can download this, inspect it yourself. Coming up, sin taxes. Do you want to smoke, drink, or just eat junk food? Different states have different plans for taking your money. That's next. Psst, want a beer? You must pay extra for it because in addition to sales tax, states impose a sin tax on products like this. When I bought this bottle of whiskey, I had to pay an additional $2 beyond sales tax for the sin of Jack Daniels. And if you smoke cigarettes, you must be really sinful because this carton costs almost $60 more because politicians tax you to save you from yourself. And what's wrong with that? Don't we want government to discourage destructive behaviors? No, says Reason TV's Nick Gillespie. Well, why not?
If I want to hear about sin, I'll go to church or an Anthony Weiner press conference. When I turn to politicians, what I want is fair laws that apply equally to all people and all products.
Well, who cares what you want? The wise politicians have decided it's better for the country if we're not all drunk or smoking cigarettes, and probably is.
And there is a case to be said that cigarettes impose costs or externalities on people in terms of health care when people get sick and have emphysema, and we take care of them. So you can say, yeah, there should be a tax on that to cover those types of clearly identifiable linked health conditions that get pushed onto other people. But that isn't, when New York City charges $5 in sin taxes for a pack of cigarettes or Chicago $6, they're going far beyond that. And this is what's odd about sin taxes. They're supposed to be high to discourage consumption of a good, but then they also are used to raise revenue that gets spent on all sorts of things.
And I notice as fewer people smoke, the politicians are more eager to.
Well, that's because people who are fat, people who are smokers, they're minority groups essentially, and they can be demonized, and then you can start, ratcheting up the costs that they have to pay for the things they want.
But the tax has a cost, too, in that it encourages people to cheat, go to the black market. Right. One study found that most of the cigarettes sold in New York State were sold illegally, smuggled in.
It was like 57% of cigarettes used in New York State were brought in illegally or, in an unauthorized way. And that's because New York has very high cigarette taxes.
So we have a new form of organized crime.
That's right, or a lifeline for the old form of organized crime, because this has long been, going back hundreds of years in America, getting around excise taxes and sin taxes on things like cigarettes, smokes and booze, basically.
I think most Americans like the idea of our elected officials manipulating us in a good way. And for a while, we had luxury taxes, another form of sin tax. We had a tax on private planes and on cars valued over $30,000,
right.
boats over $100,000. That seems fair. Rich luxury.
This nothing underscores more clearly how sin taxes are often symbolic gestures. Those types of taxes become big luxury taxes during recessions, and you're looking to scapegoat somebody. And this happened in, I guess, the early 90s, where people were like, okay, let's go after luxury yachts. It's Thurston Howell III and these billionaires, who have yachts. Let's screw them by taxing them on that. What that does is it reduces the demand for yachts, and the people who make yachts are not billionaires, and you had lots of people thrown out of business. Same thing happened with the RVs.
And they lobbied and repealed it within 3 years.
So that's kind of good. But this impulse to say certain things are sinful and wrong in colonial America, you could be taxed heavily for dressing above your station if you wore fancy, ribbons. Leather boots were, if they were extravagant, they were taxed heavily. This is, I'm about to say that's not what America is about. In fact, it's true. It was what America was about. But, we live in a secular society. We don't even have an official category of sin in the political arena other than what politicians do on a daily basis. So let's, tax politicians, tax the laws, put a tax on new laws, but leave the candy bars alone.
But we revere the founders, and when George Washington was president, they passed a tax on whiskey. Alexander Hamilton said, when people drink too much, they often do things they regret, and we got our first whiskey tax.
And, that is one of the very few things I think that everybody will agree. Alexander Hamilton was certainly right. Drunkenness often leads to bad behavior. There was also a whiskey rebellion against that, and it didn't stamp it out, but it's clear that, the problem I think a government would be better if it taxed everything equally, as long as we're talking about activities or goods that consenting adults are freely choosing.
And researching this, you found there was a tax on importing slaves.
That's right. Yeah, it was an excise tax. I mean, just like there was on tea, and it's kind of disturbing that, colonial protesters protested taxes on teas, but not quite on slaves in the same way.
All right, moving to present day, after the Newtown tragedy, a Newtown lawmaker proposed a sin tax on violent video games.
Yeah. Even though there is absolutely no serious, research that shows that playing violent video games causes...
Not serious research. They play them much more in Japan, where there's less crime.
This again underscores the kind of scapegoating that goes on. When there's a problem, throw a law at it, throw a tax at it, and demonize, video gamers are, a demonized outgroup.
Colorado's all excited about the money they'll get from marijuana.
And this is, in a way it's good, because that's the upside of sin taxes, is that cash-strapped governments everywhere, they always want more revenue, and suddenly they're willing to say something like, maybe it's not such a bad thing if adults can legally smoke pot instead of going on the black market. We'll tax it. People are happy to pay that tax, at least for a while, at a higher rate. I think it should be taxed at the same as any other good, as milk, essentially. But, that is one of the ways that sin taxes can be, I think, a powerful agent for liberalizing good policies.
Thank you, Nick Gillespie. Next, how complex taxes, like what we have in here, invite politicians to use this to punish their enemies. That's not good. Done your taxes yet? Be careful, because what you think is legal may not be. You have good reason to be confused, because who can understand this stuff? 3 examples. An orthodontist suggested someone take clarinet lessons to correct an overbite. The tax court said those lessons are deductible. But when a psychotherapist recommended piano lessons to relax someone, the court denied that deduction. A doctor recommended swimming to a patient with emphysema. The court said the cost of the pool and its upkeep are deductible. But when a doctor told a fat patient to exercise, the court ruled the home gym that he got is not deductible. Finally, if you own a junkyard and you want to get rid of mice, you can deduct the cost of food you give to feral cats. But you may not deduct the cost of a watchdog that guards your home office. Did you get the difference? I don't either. But that's what you get with garbage like this. Let's junk it all and start over with something much simpler. Of course, that would just address the income tax. The politicians grab almost as much money from sneaky taxes that you may not even notice.
You and I pay them all day long, from the moment I wake up and turn on a light.
I pay more when I brush my teeth and license my dog. My building pays property and fuel taxes. Half is my monthly bill. And when I leave home, take the subway to work, I pay the Metropolitan Commuter Transportation Mobility Tax.
So many taxes. I need a drink. Multiple and complex taxes are a threat, not just because they take more money from us, but because they give the ruling class power to punish their critics. We learned about one campaign to do that.
The Internal Revenue Service's practice of targeting conservative groups.
They would look for keywords like Tea Party or Patriot.
At least we found out about that one. But how many other times has this happened that we don't know about? Complex tax rules are an invitation to the ruling class to abuse its power. Our best protection is simplicity. If everyone understands the rules, it's hard to manipulate them. Of course, even better protection would be smaller, limited government. Is it too late to wish for that? I hope not, because that's why we do this show. That's all for tonight. See you next week.